everyone. My name is Tiffany McKinnon, and today I will be talking about my presentation, Tipping the Scales, Understanding the Disconnect Between Grades and Borders. So a little bit about me. My name is Tiffany McKinnon. I got my BA at the University of Minnesota Twin Cities campus. I recently finished my master's program in MA TESOL with a focus on educational technology here at Westcliff University. I have been a part of cyber for the previous years, and this is my first year being a part of SOAR, so I'm happy to be here. And currently, I am back at attending the University of Minnesota for my PhD program in organizational leadership policy development with a focus in leadership for intercultural and international education. My specialization is in gamifying curriculum. I am also an amateur fictions writer and researcher, as well as a connoisseur of art, animation, and all things gaming. So, context for this presentation. Generally, we'll be talking about the grading scale and how grading scales have a lot of factors to them. One being the numerical scale, the weight of the credit that the student is participating in, the weight of the classroom, conversion from percentage to alphabet scale to numerical scale, grade point average, pass or fail, and transferable credit, both internationally and domestic. This is something that all students generally go through when going from school to school. And for domestic, for this case, we're talking about the US. One of the main issues when it comes for students who are transferring, let's say if they're transferring from a community college to a four-year university, is the weight of the credits that they gained in the community college, and how does that transfer over to the university? Even between a four-year university and another four-year university, there will still be discrepancy between that. And now we'll be talking about discrepancies. So there is not a unified grading scale that is adhered to. So the challenges that may arise are the GPA conversion, credit conversion and weight, and difficulty in expectation, meaning, for example, let's say if we came from a community college and you want to go to a four-year university, so you go to community college for your generals, and the credits should transfer over to your four-year university so that you can then declare your major during your sophomore or junior year, depending on the requirements. But sometimes the community college may have different requirements of what are considered generals compared to the four-year university. For example, me personally, I had environmental science that I needed for my generals here in Minnesota in order to transfer to the University of Minnesota. And from community college, I did my earth science, my physical science, but since I didn't take the lab, it did not count for an earth science credit over at the University of Minnesota, even though I did take the class and it does count for the community college requirements. That was not transferable. And so understanding that the policies and the weight of the credit as well as the requirements for the credit are different between schools is very important and usually vastly overlooked, even when it comes to going to like your advisor, because they might not know, especially when they might not even be able to gain access to that information. Another example is like what I have here, talking about the US grading chart versus the UK grading chart. And as you can see, when it goes to, let's say, difficulty expectation, we have it where in the US, like there are discrepancies even within the US when it comes to what is an acceptable grade, what constitutes as an F, what constitutes as anything above that. But generally, rule of thumb is that in the US, 50% is an F. Anything below 60%, some places 65%, would be considered an F as well. 65 or 60% and higher would be in the D and passing range, though sometimes a D is not even considered a passing grade in certain schools. So if someone were to transfer, let's say from the UK, they might believe that, okay, if I get at least 40% of my work done, then I will have a passing grade in order to earn the credit for this course. Where they may struggle with it. They may say, okay, but at least I can pass it. that won't be passable here. And while it is somewhat on the student to understand the discrepancy between that, generally they won't even learn that discrepancy until they enter that classroom. They've already paid for the classroom, and no one was there to walk them through, okay, this is specifically what the pass and fail borderline is for this specific class. Since a lot of universities here, even within one university, there are multiple grading scales depending on the college you're in, the how you say this, if you were in the College of Education versus College of Liberal Arts versus College of Design versus College of Fine Arts, all the grading scales in there are different. And even within one college, between the classrooms, depending on what the teacher like prefers, the grading scale in there could be different as well. It could be a pass fail. It could be where the grading chart goes from 0 to 100. It could be where the grading chart goes from 0 to 4. So now going on to the hypothetical database that I am proposing. So for the database, it will be kind of a mass of resources for students where the bulk of the information can be found and facilitated in one concentrated area, or one site in this case. So what they could find in there would be grading ranges, policies for schools, as well as policies for specific departments within the schools. Since even in departments, there are different policies, as well as the credit requirement for the school, meaning what credits they need in order to fulfill the graduation requirements and also the general requirements and even the major requirements for the specific school. And so usages. Who will have access to this database? Ideally, it would be current and prospective students, teachers and faculty, but also the general public, which I put an asterisk there because while it is beneficial and for prospective students specifically, they would be considered part of the general public, when it comes to editing rights, that's where the general public will probably have more of a viewing rights, where they cannot edit the information because that's where we can go into some territories that could make it a free-for-all, and we're trying to avoid a free-for-all. So the items needed to build this library would be syllabi, code of conducts, as well as grading scales, which generally would be in the syllabi, but sometimes, depending on how the school is organized, there may be a whole school-wide grading scale in the case of like certain private schools and certain like very small community colleges and everything else. But generally, the syllabi should have all the information that you need, as well as a description of how the school handles credit transfers and the facilities and the faculty that you would need to contact for that. If you want to learn more information, hopefully all information would have been on there, but that's where we go into some of the roadblocks. Some of the roadblocks and costs being, a lot of times when it comes to the syllabi as well as certain policies, it is considered proprietary information of the school, which is why it's usually kept between the students and the teacher that is teaching currently. So the next roadblock to consider is domain upkeep, where number one, there'd be the cost of the domain, which technically would not be bad if you were to go on the cheaper side of, let's say, a Google domain. That's $12 a year, but then you'd have to provide compensation for those who would gather the information, those who cross-check the information, all the manpower that will go into information legitimacy. So considering, is the syllabus that you are adding in viable due to either the teacher who's teaching the class no longer being there or the class itself no longer being there? Accessibility and compatibility would be formats of the site or of the database, meaning is it will be desktop only, Will it be mobile? In certain places, it might not be feasible for a student to have access to a desktop, and maybe the mobile device is their main form of technology that they use to access the internet. Another component of accessibility would be the language barrier. Language would hold a big importance when it comes to translating the information on the syllabi so that it could be accessible to multiple different, how you say, nationalities of students. So, for example, if we were to have a student who is from Japan and wanted to study in the US, ideally the site would be for them for, how would you say, to make things easier, it'd be in Japanese. They'd have an option for the site to be in Japanese, as well as see the information that's on the syllabus of the English university they want to go to and be able to translate that into Japanese. While it is true that generally there is a language requirement when it comes to transferring to a university, we want to streamline this to make it as easily understandable and lessen the stress as much as possible for students of all sides of this. So on the other side, let's say if a English speaking student wants to go study in Japan, ideally the site would be in English for them, and the syllabus and the requirements and the policies for the Japanese university they want to go to would be provided in English so that they can understand exactly what is expected of them. They can even compare the grading scale to their own current home university and understand what constitute as a passing grade, how much the credits can transfer over, and overall avoid, how would you say, a miscommunication, as well as potentially having to redo a course. And then lastly is the cost. Kind of talked about that when it comes to domain upkeep, as well as gathering the information and the manpower that goes behind that. That will all like essentially cost money because it is not easy to compile a ginormous database. And while it is ideal that people would be more inclined to pass on the information for the greater good of the incoming and current students that want to either travel abroad, want to transfer to another university and pursue higher education, pursue education somewhere else, maybe they need to move or anything like that, that's not exactly feasible. So there will be a need for most likely compensating uh, the people providing information, as well as general upkeep and data management. And here are my references. Thank you for tuning in, and I will take questions in a moment.